My story takes place here in Ohio. When my son told me, "You'll be fine in the garage for a while," I just stared at him. He added, "I slept there 2 nights. But by the third night I handed him the eviction notice myself." That morning his wife snapped at me across the kitchen table, her voice sharp enough to cut through the silence. "Listen, old hag," she said, "you're suffocating us in the house. The garage is the only place we can breathe. Think of it as a test. If you survive the winter, maybe we'll reconsider." Then she slammed her coffee mug so hard it made the saucer jump. I stayed silent, hands folded in my lap, feeling every one of my 75 years pressed down on me. I had worked nearly 5 decades as a court secretary, organized, reliable, respected. People knew me for my case files, neatly packed in leather satchels, and my strong, calm voice echoing through courtrooms. But 3 months ago I had a minor stroke and suddenly I couldn't keep up anymore. I thought I was coming home to rest, to recover in familiar warmth. Instead, I ended up surrounded by cobwebbed boxes and dusty garden tools in a cold garage. After the stroke, my doctor had said I shouldn't live alone, so my son Adam offered I move in for a while. I agreed, thinking they meant to actually help, maybe drive me to doctor's appointments, help with groceries, keep an eye on my meds. But what they meant was, stay out of sight. The morning after my first night in the garage, I woke up to sawdust covering the floor. My bed was just a folding cot with a worn-out blanket that barely held warmth. There was no heat, no window, only a flashlight hanging from a hook. I stared up at the ceiling beams, counting the cracks, watching how the paint peeled and bubbled. I missed the courtroom, the echo of voices, the click of keyboards, the fresh scent of legal paperwork. Later that morning, Adam stuck his head in and asked, "You okay, Mom?" His voice sounded halfway between worried and irritated. He was still in sweatpants, wrinkled like his wife's attitude. I nodded, but my throat felt dry and dusty. "We'll get you a space heater," he said. "I just need to check the breaker." "Okay," I murmured. As soon as the door closed, I heard his wife's voice in a low hiss. "If she freezes, we won't have to deal with any of the power of attorney stuff." Then louder, "It's better than dealing with this every single day." I stayed completely still, pretending to sleep. My body felt weak, but my mind was sharp. I remembered the days I juggled court calendars, flipped through evidence folders, filed warrants without missing a beat. Now I was nothing more than a weight they wished they could shake off. I found my robe hung over the garage door and wrapped it around me. Sitting back on the cot, hands in my lap, I breathed in the scent of cardboard, old tools, and motor oil. I couldn't help but wonder, had I become a symbol of aging they didn't want to see? The second night was colder. I pulled the blanket tighter and whispered prayers I wouldn't wake up shivering. I thought of my late husband, his laugh, the way he held me when I cried after the stroke. I thought of our little apartment, long sold now. I thought of those courthouse corridors, of every document I'd signed with a steady hand. The next morning my phone chirped faintly. I'd hidden it inside the glove box of their SUV when I moved in. It was my niece calling from Chicago. "Aunt Linda, how are you?" she asked, her voice full of warmth. "I'm managing," I told her quietly. She hesitated, then said, "You sound cold. Are you somewhere safe?" I swallowed. "I'm safe." She told me her mom had said I was staying in the den. I paused, then admitted, "I'm sleeping in the garage." There was silence. Then she said, "That's not legal." She hung up. I closed my eyes. Legal. That word used to shape my world. But I had been so focused on being grateful, on not causing trouble, I hadn't realized how far I'd let things go. Gratitude should live in a warm house, not out in the cold. That afternoon I tried to stay busy. I found my granddaughter's old toy chest and pulled out one of her childhood blankets. I lined my cot with it, folded the other next to me, and turned the flashlight toward the bed instead of the shelves. It gave a small illusion of comfort. But I wasn't welcome here. I wasn't safe. And I certainly wasn't home. That night I heard them talking through the wall vent. Adam's voice was tight. "I can't believe she's still alive," he muttered. His wife replied, barely above a whisper, "Better this than giving her control over everything. You're not ready." Then Adam said, "We'll wait till the lawyer says she's legally incompetent." I pressed my ear closer. Incompetent. That word hit hard. They were plotting, filling out forms, all while I lay freezing because they wanted control. They wanted the money. I curled into myself, eyes closed, tears silently falling. This wasn't family. This was calculation. And as I prayed not to freeze that night, I also prayed my mind would stay sharp. I prayed that someone, anyone, would see the truth of what was happening. I kept thinking about my days in the courthouse. The gavel strikes, the shuffle of briefs, the way authority used to rest in my hands. I still had words. I still had clarity. And I still had enough of myself left to act. Those 2 nights in the garage weren't just punishment, they were a test. They wanted me quiet, tucked away like something forgotten. But what I realized out there changed everything. Surviving doesn't mean staying silent. Endurance doesn't mean obedience. That thought stayed with me into the 3rd morning when I stood tall, walked into their dining room with a clear head and steady breath, and handed them the eviction notice, signed by my attorney and backed by a retired judge who knew me well. A judge who remembered what justice felt like, even if it came from a garage colder than a jail cell. That first night in the garage had been worse than I imagined. I'd piled on every sweater I owned, wrapped the scratchy blanket around me tight, and still the chill crawled in under the door that connected to the main house. Every sound outside, the wind in the trees, the whir of cars down the road, echoed louder through those thin walls. My bones ached from the metal bar in the cot pressing into my back. I curled up small like some wounded stray and just waited for morning. But what truly kept me awake weren't the drafts. It was the memories. I saw Adam again as a little boy, those bright eyes when I packed his school lunches, the way he used to hug me tight after spelling bees, even the ones he lost. I remembered working overtime at the courthouse, typing until my fingers went numb, just so he could have piano lessons and sneakers that weren't falling apart. I remembered scraping together every last penny for his college tuition when his dad's pension dried up, giving up my own vacations so he could earn his finance degree at that fancy university across the country. And now I was lying in his garage, treated like an afterthought. The next morning my joints felt like rusted hinges as I sat up on the cot. I could see my breath in the air. I poured a little water from the thermos they'd left me, barely warm, and tried to ease the tightness in my chest. There was a tray beside it, a cold bowl of rice porridge, no spoon. I dug a plastic fork from my purse and made do. Once I heard them leave, I slipped out the side door and shuffled down to the mailbox just to move. My knees screamed with every step, but I held my spine straight. Later that afternoon, through a cracked window high on the garage door, I watched them come home with arms full of party supplies. Wine, chips, cake. Laughter echoed through the driveway. That's when I remembered. It was Rachel's birthday. She was turning 42. I stayed quiet in the garage, watching through the sliver in the curtain as they popped champagne, taped up gold letters that read, "Happy birthday, Rachel," and passed around slices of cake. No one checked on me. No one brought me a plate. That night I coughed until my throat burned. I tried to be quiet, wiped blood from my lip with my sleeve, and hid the stained cloth under the mattress so they wouldn't know. I didn't knock. I knew my place. I wasn't welcome in their family moments. Close to midnight I heard steps on the back porch. The garage walls were thinner near the water heater, so I pressed my ear to the spot and held still. It was Adam on the phone. His voice was sharp and low. "She's still here," he said. "Yeah, I figured 2 days tops." Pause. "We can't move forward until we have proof she's incompetent. Once we get 2 more doctors, we can file for full guardianship." Another pause. "She won't sign anything. She just sits in there like a ghost." And then he chuckled. "Tougher than she looks. But if she slips even once, gets confused, forgets something, we can file." I stepped back, sick to my stomach. Guardianship. That's what this was really about. It wasn't just coldness. It was a plan. A legal plan to take control of my choices, my care, my assets. They were watching me, waiting for a crack in the surface. Waiting for me to forget something, fumble a word, lose my footing. They'd mistaken my silence for surrender. They didn't realize what kind of woman they were dealing with. I sat back on the cot, hands trembling, not from fear but from rage. I pulled the blanket around me and shut my eyes, not to rest but to think. To remember. By the time the sun came up I had a plan. Not revenge. Just the truth. And I would deliver it the way I used to deliver court filings. With quiet resolve and complete precision. They thought a couple nights in the cold would break me. But they had no idea who laid the foundation of the house they were drinking in. I wasn't going to shout. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to show them. My granddaughter Ava gave me the watch 2 Christmases ago. "You've got to stay sharp, Grandma," she said, strapping the little thing on my wrist like she was gifting me armor. It tracks your steps, checks your heart rate, and if anything ever happens, it records. I had smiled, humored her. She was always thoughtful like her mom, my daughter. Gone too soon. I wore the watch every day to make her happy. I never thought it would end up being my protection. But that night, after hearing Adam's plan through the vent, I reached for the face of that little watch and tapped it 3 times. The little screen blinked red once. That meant it was listening, and just like that, I started recording. The next morning, I didn't say a word over breakfast. Not that anyone offered me food, but when I passed Adam in the hallway as he poured his coffee, I smiled like nothing had changed. Then I walked straight back to the garage and shut the door behind me. That afternoon they had company again. This time it was Adam's old college friend, Rick. Loud, pushy, always cracking jokes with a voice that carried like thunder. I heard them chatting just beyond the thin wall that separated the garage from the kitchen. "She's still out there?" Rick asked, laughing like it was a joke. Adam answered, "Yeah. In the garage." Rick gasped. "Man, that's cold." Adam just chuckled. "It's been our house since we got married. Just missing the paperwork." Then Rachel chimed in with that sharp voice of hers. "The garage is the only place she can die without bothering anyone." And they all laughed. I pressed the watch again. Another blink. Another file saved. I captured every second, every cruel, thoughtless word. That laughter, that casual cruelty, it was all on tape. That night I reviewed the recordings. Clear, sharp, every sentence crisp. The kind of evidence judges lean in to hear. The kind I used to collect myself. I connected to the garage's hidden Wi-Fi. Adam had thought he disabled access, but he didn't know I had paid for a second line years ago during a renovation. I pulled my old tablet from my suitcase and transferred the files. Audio, video, all of it. Then I sent everything to someone I hadn't spoken to in nearly a decade. Her name was Deborah. We'd worked together for over 20 years. She used to be the lead clerk in family court, famous for her sharp memory and absolute zero tolerance for abuse. When I retired, she gave me a yellow rose and said, "If you ever truly need me, you call." So that night I did. She picked up on the first ring. "Took you long enough to stop being polite," she said. I told her, "I've got something." "I figured you would," she replied. I sent the files. 5 minutes later her message came through. "Got them. You're not alone. Sit tight. This is going to move fast." Suddenly, the cold in the garage didn't feel quite so harsh, because Justice had heard me and she was getting dressed. I waited until the whole house was asleep. It was just past midnight when I slipped on my coat and sat near the side door, the one spot in the garage where I could still get a phone signal. I held the phone to my chest as it rang, hands trembling, not from fear but from the weight of what I was about to do. When he answered, his voice hadn't changed at all. Measured, calm, low. "Linda," he said. "Yes, Judge Whitaker," I whispered. "I hope I didn't wake you." He sighed. "I've been waiting for this call for years." He meant it. I could hear it in the way his voice softened. "Tell me everything," he said. And I did. Quietly, carefully, just the facts, like I had done 1,000 times in his courtroom. I told him about the garage, the freezing nights, the recordings, their plan to declare me incompetent, their cruel jokes about me dying quietly. "I have everything," I said. "Audio, video, names, dates, clear as day." He paused, then reminded me. "I told you once if you were ever betrayed to call me first." "I remember," I whispered. "And I told you why," he added. "Because no one remembers the sharpest woman in the room until it's her word against theirs. And when it is, they lose." My throat tightened. "Can you help me?" "I'm retired," he said, "but I still have friends. And I know which doors still open." That night we built a case, layer by layer, just like the old days. He connected me with a clerk in the Court of Common Pleas. By 3 a.m., my petition was submitted through a secure channel. Deborah had already prepared the draft. We filed for an emergency restraining order against Adam and Rachel, citing elder abuse, financial coercion, and illegal living conditions. We also included a motion to freeze assets in case they tried to touch my accounts. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even lie down. I sat upright on the edge of my cot, my robe tight around me, eyes fixed on the flickering shadows dancing across the wall. At 7:13 a.m. my phone buzzed. Order granted. Emergency injunction approved. Enforcement within 12 hours. That was all I needed. By 9 a.m., Deborah had already contacted a court-appointed officer and the local police. My name was removed from any dependent status on medical paperwork Adam had submitted. A forensic auditor was assigned to examine my bank accounts and any recent activity. At noon, while Rachel scrolled through her phone and Adam stood by the coffee maker, I walked out of the garage with a sealed envelope in my hand. He looked up surprised. "Mom, you okay?" I placed the envelope on the table, slid it forward with 2 fingers and said calmly, "Effective immediately, you are both legally barred from contacting me, managing my finances or accessing anything tied to my estate." He laughed like I was joking. Then Deborah stepped in behind me. And right behind her came an officer, with a clipboard and a badge. "Adam Whitaker," the officer said, "you've been served." Rachel dropped her mug and it shattered on the tile. "What is this?" she shouted. "Restraining order," Deborah replied calmly. "And formal notice of a financial investigation." Adam's jaw clenched. "You can't be serious." I met his eyes and spoke plainly. "You left me to freeze in a garage. You laughed about it. You pretended to care while planning to take everything." He started to speak but the officer raised a hand. "No further comment. This is now a legal matter." Just like that, the house I had helped pay for, the one I thought would shelter me, was no longer theirs to twist and control. The woman they'd tried to silence had returned, armed with proof, protected by the very system I once upheld. And this time the gavel was mine to drop. On the morning of the 3rd day I felt no fear. I hadn't slept much, but it wasn't worry that kept me up. It was focus. The same sharp, clear focus I used to carry with me down courthouse steps before sunrise, gripping my coffee and flipping through case files in the bitter cold. This wasn't rage, it was precision. Legal clarity. I slipped into my best coat, a dark navy wool one Charles gave me the Christmas before he passed. I brushed my hair, dabbed some color onto my cheeks, and tucked the thick yellow envelope under my arm like it was nothing more than a warm loaf of bread. I didn't knock. I walked straight into the kitchen. Adam stood by the counter, shirtless, swirling milk into his cereal, humming like the world was just fine. Rachel leaned against the sink in her robe, scrolling her phone with a lazy smirk. I stepped to the center of the room and set the envelope gently on the table. Then I stepped back and folded my hands. Adam looked annoyed. "What's that?" he muttered. I didn't answer. He rolled his eyes, tore the envelope open and started scanning the contents. Then he froze. His eyes locked on the court stamp, the formal header, the legal language printed in bold. Complaint filed. Charges listed: elder abuse, financial coercion and neglect. Plaintiff: Linda and Whitaker. Defendant: Adam Richard Whitaker. Rachel looked up, fingers suspended mid-scroll. "What is this?" she demanded. Adam gave a hollow laugh. "You sued your own son?" "No," I said quietly. "I filed the truth. You turned a garage into my prison. You chose ambition over decency. Now I've made the law my witness." He slammed the document down. "This is insane. This won't stick." Rachel snatched the papers. Her face went pale. "Adam, there's an emergency order in here. 30-day restraining order. Effective immediately." "Yes," I said. "Effective now." Adam's voice rose. "You're my mother." "And you're the defendant," I replied. He crushed the paper in his hand, fists trembling. "You think this scares me? You think I'm just going to let this happen? I'll call my lawyer." The doorbell rang. None of us moved. Then came a loud knock. 3 sharp hits. Adam stormed to the door and yanked it open. 2 officers stood on the porch. One held a clipboard. "Adam Whitaker?" the taller one asked. Adam swallowed hard. "Yeah. You've been served a protective order filed through the Court of Common Pleas, approved under Emergency Statute 57E. We are here to enforce the 30-day no-contact order and begin inventory for a temporary financial freeze." Rachel gasped. I stayed still, hands folded calmly. Adam's shoulders started to shake. "This is madness. She's old. He's confused. She doesn't know what she's doing." I stepped forward. "I know exactly what I'm doing. I gave you 30 years of sacrifice, Adam. I gave you a future. And you gave me a garage and a plan to strip me of everything I had left." He looked at me like I was someone he didn't recognize. Rachel backed away, pale and wordless. The officer handed him a packet. You have 1 hour to pack your belongings. You must relocate. Any contact, verbal or digital, will violate the court order and may result in arrest. I'm her son, he mumbled. You were, I said. But today, you're just another man who underestimated a woman with a memory. He didn't speak again. They were gone within the hour. By sunset, the garage stood empty. I wrapped myself in Charles's coat and sat at the kitchen table, the same chair they once said I wasn't welcome to sit in, and opened the window, letting the winter air drift in. Not because I had to, but as I could. By the end of that week, my story had made it out of the garage and into the public eye. It began with a local journalist, Tessa, soft-spoken, thoughtful. I'd seen her around the courthouse back in the day. She reached out to Deborah after hearing rumors. A protective order issued in less than 12 hours, a son removed from his home by his own mother, a retired court clerk. Tessa asked if I would share my story. I said yes. We met in Deborah's office. I told it plainly, the way I once read court briefs. No tears, no theatrics. Just the facts. The recordings, the timeline, the cold porridge, the blood I wiped from my sleeve, the birthday party I watched from behind a garage door, the laughter that followed their plan. 2 days later, the article ran in the local paper. And the headline nearly took my breath away. The headline read, "Mother sleeps in garage, takes son to court and wins." The subhead followed. Retired court clerk files elder abuse charges after being forced into freezing conditions. Evidence includes hidden recordings and testimony from a retired judge. The photo they used showed me standing outside the courthouse in my navy wool coat, eyes steady, expression calm. That image spread fast. By Friday, regional outlets had picked up the story. A Sunday morning talk show invited me on air. I turned down the national interviews, but only because I had more important invitations to answer. The Central Ohio Women's Alliance reached out first. "We'd be honored to have you as our guest of distinction at this year's spring forum," the organizer said. "You've given so many women strength." After that came the Columbus Senior Council, then a legal roundtable, and even the State Bar Association. I was being called a folk hero, the grandmother who reclaimed her chair at the kitchen table. But what touched me most wasn't the panels or praise. It was the letters. Handwritten, heartfelt, dozens of them. One came from a woman in Pittsburgh who spent 6 months sleeping in her own basement while her daughter-in-law told everyone she was out of town. Another came from someone in rural Indiana, thanking me for reminding her that being quiet doesn't mean being powerless. Each evening, I sat at my desk, sipping tea with music playing softly in the background, and wrote back to as many as I could. It became a kind of ritual. A quiet connection with women who, like me, had waited far too long to speak up. Back in Columbus, things unraveled quickly for Adam and Rachel, faster than even Deborah expected. Their church, after reading the article and getting concerned calls, held a private meeting. Adam was quietly removed from the community board where he'd once been chairman. "He violated the moral trust we expect of our stewards," the pastor later told me. But the real reckoning came the following week. A state investigator from the Department of Aging launched a formal review of my case. They listened to the recordings I submitted. They reviewed every detail, including the now infamous line from Rachel, "The garage is the only place she can die and not inconvenience anyone." That sentence ended up in nearly every article. Rachel claimed it was taken out of context. But context didn't save her. The court temporarily suspended her custodial rights to her daughter, my granddaughter. The girl was placed in the care of Rachel's sister while the evaluation continued. I didn't attend the hearing. I didn't need to. Deborah called me afterward and said, "It's done. She's out." I felt no joy in seeing a mother lose her child. But I did feel justice, for the belief that a woman's life, even near its end, should never be treated as disposable. Later that month, I was invited to speak at a seminar called Power and Quiet Resistance. I stood at the podium facing rows of women, some with silver hair, some still in their 20s, all leaning forward, listening like every word mattered. I began, I was never the loud one. I took notes. I scheduled hearings. I organized the truth into tidy folders and handed it to men who got the credit. But I never forgot how to speak. I just waited until it mattered. They put me in a garage and called it generosity. I recorded their cruelty and gave it to justice. Not for revenge, but so that if another woman finds herself in a garage with no coat, she knows she is not alone. The audience stood. I didn't smile wide. I simply bowed my head, quiet and grounded. That night, I returned home to the apartment Angela had helped me find. It was small, just 2 rooms on the second floor of a quiet neighborhood in Westerville, about 20 minutes from the courthouse where I once served. No velvet curtains. No granite countertops. Just a warm chair by the window, a working heater and peace. The kind that doesn't shout. The kind that never forgets. Angela, my granddaughter's daughter, my strongest tie to hope, was the one who found the place. She drove me there the day after the protective order took effect. She carried my suitcase, unpacked my clothes, arranged my keepsakes on the bookshelf without needing to ask where they belonged. She brewed my tea before I asked. And she was the first to call me Grandma again, like nothing had ever tried to steal that name from me. "You're safe now," she said. And for the first time in months, I believed it. Angela comes by 3 nights a week after her shifts at the hospital. We make soup. We play dominoes. Sometimes we just sit in silence. I love that silence. It doesn't bruise. It heals. After the media storm died down, I received another invitation. This time not to a women's forum or a legal panel, but to speak on national television. A Sunday morning segment called Voices of the Forgotten wanted to feature my case as part of their series on elder abuse and family betrayal. First I said no. I had said enough. I had won. What more was there to prove? But Angela looked at me with those clear, honest eyes and said, "Grandma, someone out there is still sleeping in a garage. Someone out there doesn't have a lawyer or a judge or a recording," Angela told me. "But maybe they'll hear you." So I said yes. The studio was cold and clinical, the lights too bright. The anchor was polished and charming. He held my hand during the sound check. I wore my best navy blouse, pinned my hair back and sat tall despite the mic clipped to my collar feeling heavy on my chest. When the cameras rolled, I began like this. "I'm not here to cry. I already did that. I'm here to remember, because memory, when protected, becomes evidence." I told the story about the stroke, the garage, the whispers through the wall. I spoke slowly, not because of age, but because I wanted every word to fall like footsteps on thin ice. Then I paused. "I don't hate my son. I mourn him. I mourn who he used to be. I don't want punishment. I want prevention." The segment aired 2 days later. The station received over 4,000 emails. Some offered help. Others sent donations to elder abuse shelters. Many simply wrote, "I believe you, and now I believe myself." After that, I started volunteering with the Ohio Elder Support Network, advising people, mostly women, who weren't sure if what they were experiencing counted as abuse. And I told them, if you have to ask whether something is abuse, it probably is. I've never seen myself as a warrior. I don't like war. But I do believe in standing firm, drawing a line and saying, "Not this time." Because sometimes the strongest thing a woman can do is endure, remember, and finally speak. The house still stands there, quiet on a tree-lined street in Westerville. Blue shutters, the crooked mailbox I always meant to fix. It's no longer their stronghold or my shame. After the court ruled in my favor, I regained full ownership. Adam and Rachel fought it briefly, but the judge reviewed the original transfer, manipulated under duress, and declared it void. My name was restored. Theirs removed. I didn't move back in. Instead, I rented it out, not to strangers but to a young couple caring for their disabled mother. I met them myself. I saw how they gently pushed her wheelchair, how they asked about her comfort before their own. I knew they were the right ones. Every dollar of that rent goes into the fund I started, Justice in Silence. It's not a large organization, but its mission is clear: to provide legal and emotional support to elderly people suffering quiet abuse at the hands of their own families. Not bruises but cold garages. Empty bowls. Indifference. I work with lawyers, social workers, volunteers. We answer calls. We listen. We say what too few have heard. You are not alone. You are not imagining this. To launch the foundation, we recorded a short video. The crew set up in my apartment. A light, a mic, one chair. They asked me to speak freely. I looked straight into the lens and said, they thought I was just an old woman who didn't know what was happening. But I do. I know contracts. I know silence. I know the law. I lived it for 47 years. They thought they could leave me in a garage. I turned that cold into evidence. I used to be a mother who cooked dinner and folded laundry. Now I am a woman who delivers consequences. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it watches. And when it's time, it stands. That video now plays on our homepage. It's been viewed over 500,000 times. I still live simply. My days are quiet. But when I sit by the window with a cup of tea and hear children laughing in the street, I smile. Because this isn't a story of how I was mistreated. It's the story of how I remembered who I was, and became the judge of my own ending. After everything, the court orders, the interviews, the foundation, I started writing letters. Not to reporters. Not to attorneys. To them. To Adam. To Rachel. And most of all to my granddaughter. Not out of sentiment, but because some things need to be said clearly, calmly, and permanently. The letter to Adam was 3 pages long. Typed, signed, sent by certified mail. I began simply, "You stopped calling me Mom long before the garage." I reminded him of the summer I worked weekends to buy his first suit for the debate team. Of relearning to drive at 60 so I could take him to college interviews while his father was in the hospital. I reminded him that I never asked him for repayment, only for respect. Then I wrote, "When you put me in the garage, you didn't just fail as a son. You failed as a man entrusted with memory. You forgot who held your fevered body during nights of croup and worry. And that forgetting, more than your cruelty, is what condemned you." I ended without bitterness, but also without forgiveness. You may rebuild your life, but not with my silence. You lost that right. The letter to Rachel was shorter. You laughed about where I might die. I hope you hear that laughter in your mind every time your daughter asks where her grandmother went. No more, no less. The hardest letter I wrote was to my granddaughter. She was only 12 when it happened, young enough to be protected, old enough to notice the silence. On the second night, she slipped a folded card under the garage door. I still have it. "I'm sorry if I was mean. I love you, Maddie." I didn't answer then. But now, from my small desk near the window, I finally wrote her back. "Maddie, you did nothing wrong. The quiet between us wasn't your fault. Sometimes adults hide their shame and call it protection. But loving someone means asking questions, even hard ones. I hope one day when you're ready you'll ask me everything. And when you do, I'll tell you the truth. I will never make you feel small for seeking it." I signed it simply, "With love always and unshakably, Grandma." I mailed it. I don't know if she'll ever reply. But I needed her to know I didn't disappear. I reclaimed my name, my space, my story, and most of all, my voice. That's what justice in silence truly means. Not punishment, but presence. Not revenge, but the restoration of truth. Page by page, word by word, until even the women left in garages are remembered by name. And no one dares forget us again. So thank you for walking this road with me. If you've made it to the end of my story, maybe it's because you recognize that cold. Subscribe to the voice inside, because revenge has no expiration date, and wisdom never retires.